Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hello and welcome to Hult International Business School's Executive Speaker Series. I am so pleased to welcome our class of 2013 here tonight. I heard that our MBAs actually have a midterm tomorrow, so thank you for those of you that made time to be with us. I also want to thank our alumni, prospective students, staff, faculty, and all of our invited guests for being with us here this evening. My name is Lisa Tenorio, and I am the Executive Director of Hult San Francisco. This Executive Speaker Series event is something we do on each of our Hult campuses to bring business leaders into the classroom so we can learn from them and be inspired by them firsthand. At Hult, we believe in practical hands-on learning rather than just purely theoretical. Our faculty are real-world practitioners, and students work on real business challenges and projects throughout their studies. Tonight, we're honored to have Biz Stone with us, an innovator and business leader who's made a major impact on how people connect and communicate around the world. Biz co-founded Twitter, so we're actually using this technology this evening to collect your thoughts and questions. So we encourage you to tweet your questions to @Hult_biz, and we'll pull from them during the Q&A at the end of this talk. Working on ways to connect people from around the world is something that is very much aligned with the core of the Hult experience. I want to give you some numbers here, so bear with me. This year in San Francisco, we have 600 students studying on campus, and they come from 97 different countries and speak an average of 3 languages, which is amazing. Globally, over 85% of our students come from outside the US, and we are the only business school that has 5 global campuses in Boston, London, Shanghai, Dubai, San Francisco, and we just launched a new rotation campus in Sao Paulo as well. So in addition to working in incredibly diverse international teams throughout the program, our students actually have the opportunity to study in up to 3 key international cities during their 1-year program. I honestly don't know any other school with that kind of diversity and international focus. Hult is really pushing the boundaries of traditional business education. More than other schools, we're interested in doing business education in new and innovative ways, and we're engaging with our students in creating this experience. I think the most brilliant example of this is the Hult Prize. This is an idea that was launched by one of our MBA students 4 years ago, Ahmad Ashkar, and this event brings teams from the leading business schools around the world to compete to find the most innovative solution to a pressing social problem. Hult then donates $1 million to implement the winning solution. This year, we're working very closely with Bill Clinton and the Clinton Global Initiative, and we're tackling the global food crisis. I don't know if you've seen this, but Bill Clinton's actually on the cover of Time magazine this month, and he talks about Hult and the Hult Prize as one of the top 5 ideas changing the world. Truly incredible. Yes. At Hult, our aspiration is to provide the best educational experience of any business school in the world, and we do that by having a different perspective. We're practical, we're innovative, and we're international in the truest sense of the word. And I think that this is paying off. Hult continues to be ranked in the top 100 business schools in the world, and we're ranked number 3 in the world for international business and number 1 for international experience, which is fantastic. I want to leave you with one final thought that I think really encapsulates what the Hult experience is about. This is something that is our theme in San Francisco this year and our vision for what we want to accomplish. And that is, we co-create, we transform, we lead, we are Hult. And now I'd like to welcome one of our current MBA students who will introduce tonight's speaker. Please welcome Michelle Lee from Toronto, Canada, to the stage.
Hi, everyone. So since I started at Hult, I've been tweeting a lot about school and professional-related topics. So if you all don't mind, can you please give me a quick smile? Perfect. I really couldn't pass up this opportunity to make a tweet, so thank you so much for indulging me. So good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Lee, and I'm an MBA student at Hult from Toronto, Canada. I'm very honored to represent Hult and its amazing students, faculty, and staff at tonight's event. One of the reasons that compelled me to stand here tonight is because I want everyone in this room to know that sharing your experiences and perspectives is an extremely powerful act, and as students and professionals, we can leverage to Twitter to do just that. Whether I'm listening to an inspirational speech by Dev Patnaik at the Hult kickoff event, reading a thought-provoking article on Fast Company, or having my first Hult Prize team meeting, I'm on Twitter sharing my professional experiences, perspectives, and values. I'm getting the attention of individuals and organizations that I care about, and I'm building awareness for my school and myself in the process. Twitter is a powerful tool for all of us in this room, and if you haven't done so already, I encourage you to adopt a Twitter handle and start sharing today. Now, as all of you know, our guest speaker tonight is none other than Biz Stone, co-founder of Twitter. Biz started his career as an internet entrepreneur in 1999 and later went on to work for Google. Biz then co-founded Twitter, which was launched in 2006 and achieved phenomenal success with over 140 million active users and 33 billion tweets per day. Biz then went on to co-found the Obvious Corporation, an organization that builds systems to help people work together to improve the world. Tonight, Biz will be speaking to us about redefining success. He will share with us stories on creativity, empathy, innovation, and entrepreneurial spirit. Without further ado, please welcome Biz Stone.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm lucky I didn't limp up here. I actually pulled a muscle changing a diaper earlier this morning. Who does that? That's got to be like a first. Well, before I do anything, I have to make sure that I thank Hult in general, but also that I thank Hult San Francisco, Hult Corporate Relations, and Hult Marketing, because I know for a fact that when an event seems easy to me, that means someone is really killing themselves to make it go well. So kudos to them, because all I've done so far is had a glass of Chardonnay. It was pretty easy. And also thanks for having me here. I'm really excited, and I'm also I already share a kinship, I feel, with Hult, since it started in Boston and that's where I was born. So like right off the bat, we're in lockstep. And Dean, Larry, Louie, and I decided we would hit the Tonga room up after this. So I'm pretty psyched. He's from here, so he knows all about the Tonga room. He was going on and on. That's his thing. I also want to just take a minute to applaud the leadership and the vision of Hult, not just for the concept of experiential learning, which I think is incredibly awesome, and I'm all for it, but also for the genuine effort to put forth the idea that we are not citizens of a particular state or a particular country, but citizens of the world. And I think Hult very aptly puts that into clear vision for us. And I'm very excited that that's being done. I think it's awesome. So congratulations to all of you for working on that. Okay, so like Michelle said, I want to talk about, I actually want to just tell some stories. I mean, it happens that a lot of these stories are from my life, but they do deal with failure, and its counterpart, success, and opportunity, creativity, change, altruism. I also want to talk a little bit about what's next, and then we're going to leave a whole bunch of time for Q&A, which is the most exciting thing for me because that's where we start going down the roads that we didn't expect to go down and things that I didn't prepare to talk to you about. So I'm actually really looking forward to that. So I will begin with, let's see, this picture, which was taken 30 seconds after I got married. I look like the happiest guy in the world, and my wife looks like she made the biggest mistake of her life. I mean, look at her body language. It's like, what have I done? And I don't know how I did it, but I managed to dig up a quote around the same time that she was doing this. And it's from Ben Franklin. It's from this guy. And it goes like this. Perhaps the history of the errors of mankind, all things considered, is more valuable and interesting than that of their discoveries. And I think it worked because we are still very happily married, as far as I know. Yeah, I think it worked. We have a baby. It's a whole thing. It worked out. But I really like that quote because it speaks, the idea of mistakes speak to failure, and I think failure is such a critical thing for us to think about and ultimately embrace. And I want to tell a story that's not a personal story of mine. I don't have wings. I don't stand on edges of bridges. This is a still from a German movie from the 80s, directed by Wim Wenders, called Wings of Desire. And I would recommend seeing the original, not the remake with Nicolas Cage, which is not good. But in the original film, and I haven't seen it in a long time, so I won't get the exact details right, but essentially there are these two immortal beings. They're like angels, and their job is to just look over Berlin. They were actually there before there were people, and now, in the film there are people, and their job is just to watch over things and make sure things are sort of going according to plan. Occasionally they'll tune into conversations people are having, and they'll make a slight adjustment and so forth. But they can't interact with reality. People don't see them, and they can't really do anything or experience anything. And so the story focuses on these two angels. One of them falls in love with a circus trapeze artist. So it's a little bit of an art film if you haven't gathered by now. And not only that, but he longs to know what it would feel like to hold a hot cup of coffee in his hands, or what it would feel like to taste food, or what it would be like to kiss a woman. And so he goes to his buddy, the other immortal, and he says, I'm going to renounce my immortality. I'm going to fall to earth as a mortal man. And the other guy's like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. We're immortal. You can't do that. If you do that, then you'll die. And he says, I know, but I want to do it. I want to experience life. And so he does it. And he also happens to, so he falls to earth naked, but he has all this like angelic armor made of gold. So he pawns it and gets a suit. And I'm pretty sure they just wrote that in, like, because how's he going to get clothes? So armor, golden armor. But that's irrelevant. The point is, he falls to earth, becomes mortal, and he does all these things he wants to do. He goes and he gets a cup of hot coffee, has a meal, and he actually ends up bumping into or locking eyes with the trapeze artist in a crowded bar, and it's as if they've known each other for a long time, and it ends nicely. And even though this is just sort of a fun, art house film, I think there's a really great lesson to be learned from it for entrepreneurs, or for anyone who is thinking in an entrepreneurial nature. And that is, in order to succeed spectacularly, you need to be willing to fail spectacularly. So in other words, in this case, you need to be willing to die to achieve your goals. Now, I don't advocate actually being willing to die, but the idea being that you need to sort of give it everything, and if it means being absolutely embarrassed, ending up totally in debt, whatever it is, you have to be willing to do all that in order to get the sort of the complementary version of it in terms of success. You can't have it easy and then have it successful. You have to go all the way. So I think there's an important lesson that I took from that film that I often find myself recommending to young startup folks, and it resonates with me. And it's not just for startups. I mean, it can be for anything. It can be for a project. So I really think that's worth that film is worth watching also because it's cool. Okay, now I want to talk about my childhood, which is represented by this picture of a bunch of naked dudes in a field, which is from Wikipedia, so it's legit. And I should probably explain more, but this is a depiction of Native American Indians playing a game called lacrosse. So when I was a little guy, my mom put me in this program called Boy Rangers, and it wasn't Boy Scouts. It was some sort of strange primordial beginning of Boy Scouts, and I'm pretty sure it was not politically correct because we were modeled after the tribes of various tribes of Native Americans, and we had to pay wampum. We had to pay wampum in order to stay in the program, which I didn't even want to be in, but I had to actually pay. And I had to give my my allowance money to be in this program. We had to advance from papoose to warrior by learning these various feats of strength and tying various knots and things like this, which is not something I really wanted to do. And as a result, because I was in Boy Rangers, and by the way, I was chief of the Blackfoot tribe. The other kids elected me chief, which just meant I had even more responsibility, which sucked. Anyways, since I was in Boy Rangers, I wasn't in like Pee-wee football or Little League or soccer or any of these other things because Boy Rangers took up my weekends and stuff. And by the time I got to high school, I thought, I should join a sports team because it seems like joining a sports team in high school is a good way to get socially integrated into I feel like Clint Eastwood now with this thing next to me. I just realized this was here. Let me go over here. I'll sit for a little bit. So I decided I should be on a sports team. Okay, so I decided I'll try out for some sports teams. So I go to try out, and I don't know, it was basketball, and I'm looking at all of the lines on the basketball court for the first time in my life, and I'm thinking I have no idea what these things are for. I don't know any of the rules. And same thing with like football, and forget about baseball. It was like some kind of religion with the rules of baseball, and so as a result, I just sort of held back and didn't do anything. And I was pretty naturally athletic at the time. Now I'm pulling muscles, changing diapers. But at the time, I was pretty athletic. And of course, no coach is going to put the kid who's not doing anything on the team. So I didn't get on any team. But instead, I did a little research, and I found out that there was a sport that was not supported by my high school, and the sport was lacrosse. Which is depicted here as an early Native American sport. They invented it. So I went to the administration of my high school, and I said, there's no lacrosse team. If I can find a coach and enough boys willing to play lacrosse, can I form a lacrosse team? And they were like, yeah, sure. If you think you can do that, then go ahead. And I did. So I got enough, and I put up a bunch of flyers and all that stuff, and I found a coach, a guy who used to play lacrosse, and we formed a team. And my theory was that if we were all equally clueless and didn't know the rules, then I didn't have to have anxiety, and I didn't have to worry about it, and I didn't have to hold back, because it was an equal playing field, a level playing field, so to speak. And I ended up being really good at lacrosse, and the other guys voted me to be the captain, and as a result, I ended up doing what I wanted to do, which was play sports in high school. And upon retrospect, I probably could have learned the rules of one of the other sports, but that's not what I did. And so this was sort of an early entrepreneurial venture for me. But the takeaway, the thing that I realized later about what I had done is such a powerful lesson for me, because I realized that by doing that, opportunity can be manufactured. So when we think about opportunity, we think about waiting for the right set of circumstances to come into the perfect alignment, and then we jump on that opportunity. But if you take a step back, you realize you can set up the circumstances yourself, and then you can just take them. And that's what I had done, and that's not just obviously true for high school lacrosse. That's across any discipline. You can think about it this way. You can think, what circumstances can I arrange such that I can create an opportunity for myself to pounce upon and therefore get what I want? And so I've kept that in mind for quite a long time, and I think about it frequently and often whenever I'm faced with certain challenges. After high school, I went to college, and I went to Northeastern, and I went to UMass, and I needed to get a side job. And I was at college on an arts scholarship, and so because I had started out as an artist, and I was an artist, but I was also kind of a computer dork, because my friend Mark had one of the early Macs. His dad was a dentist, and he could afford one. And I remember thinking, oh my God, you guys are so rich, you can buy a computer. And so we were on that thing all the time. And being an artist, when my school had one or two Macs, I would use Mac Paint, and I would just experiment with that quite a bit. So when it came to college, I was pretty adept at Photoshop and all the things that were out at that time. And I got this side job working at a publishing company in Boston called Little Brown and Company, which was on Beacon Hill. And my job wasn't that fancy. It was moving heavy boxes of books from the attic of this old mansion on Beacon Hill that was their headquarters down to the lobby. And at the time, the art department, the department that was in charge of designing the covers to all the books that Little Brown published, was just transitioning to just really old school graphic design techniques like stat machines and INTs and X-Acto knives and amberlith and just all these spray glue, all these horrible things you shouldn't be doing inside. And they were just transitioning to using desktop publishing on the Mac. So one day when they all went out to lunch, it was a small department, I found a transmittal for a cover that needed designing, and I designed the cover, and I printed it out, I matted it up, and I slipped it into the pile of book jackets that were to go off to New York for editorial and sales approval. And then I went about moving the boxes again. And when the art director came back from New York, he wanted to know who designed this book jacket. And I said, me. And he said, the box kid. And what ended up happening was I got offered a design position at Little Brown and Company designing book jackets. And I thought to myself, well, this is incredible, because don't people go to college for this? And also, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, this is a chance to apprentice, essentially. This is a chance, I wasn't thinking of the term, but experiential learning. If I work here with this older guy learning how to design book jackets, I'm going to be like, jumping light years ahead. So I had a hard decision to make, but I decided to, even though I had this great full ride to school, I decided that I would leave college and I would dedicate my time to apprenticing with this art director. So the first day I get into the office for reporting for duty as a designer, I go to the art director's door, and he beckons me into his office, and I go over to his desk. He doesn't even say anything. He reaches behind him, and he takes out this Pantone color guide of swatches, and he puts it down on his desk, and he starts leafing through wordlessly through the colors, and gets to like the browns and the sort of lighter browns and the mochas, and he takes a little perforated square out, and he puts it on his desk, and he puts one finger on it, and he slides it across, and he says, "That's how I take my coffee." And I was like, oh my God, I dropped out of college, I did all these things, and now, and he was like, I'm kidding. What do you think I am? I'm a huge jerk? Come on. It occurred to me later that would have been an incredible test. Like, if I could have matched that color, that would have been a great test for practical design. But it turns out he was a really nice guy, and so I basically apprenticed with him for like 2 or 3 years, and it occurred to me later that he basically also needed me because he had no idea how to use the computer. But at the time, I just thought I was like a hotshot designer, and I actually did do some good work and won some awards and stuff, and I really loved it. I love design because what design taught me, which is one of the most important things I've just treasured and kept with me forever. The thing that I learned from working with Steve Snyder, the art director, was that creativity is a renewable resource. I never ran out of different approaches to design. That was what was so great about it. A lot of the other designers would get really pissed off when their really sort of high concept design wasn't approved by sales and editorial, but I made it a point to create some award-winning design that also worked within the parameters of what sales and editorial was looking for. And so those were the constraints that I put around my work. And yet, even within that, I realized that there were infinite ways I could approach the design of the cover. And so that lesson is to this day a very treasured lesson. I always ask people to take a creative approach and try crazy ideas, because you never run out of them, and that's what's so wonderful about creativity. So the other thing that working with Steve really allowed me to do, which was so great, was Little Brown, after I worked with him for 2.5 years or so, Little Brown decided they would move everyone to New York from Boston, and I wasn't ready to go to New York. And Steve had also filled my head with all of these tales of his early days before he took a job as an art director, when he ran his own design studio, and how fantastic it was and everything. And I thought, well, that's what I want to do. I want to run my own design studio. That sounds really cool. It sounds like freeing. And so I decided to start my own studio. And so I realized pretty quickly that I couldn't just do book cover design, because that wasn't going to be enough work. And so this was like late 90s, I guess, or like 97 or something. And so I started teaching myself web design, because I thought, like, this is great. I can get a whole new set of clients doing this. So I started doing web design for a whole bunch of places. There seemed to be like unlimited amounts of work here. And around this time, my friends who had finished college and then gone into consulting and were getting sort of antsy in consulting and wanted to they were getting antsy because they were like, why are we telling other people how to run their companies? Why aren't we starting our own company? And they wanted to start a web company, so they said, hey, Biz, you're doing this web stuff. Like, let's start a web company. It was early enough that, like, the idea of just starting a web company seemed like a good idea. Like, what are we going to do? It's a web company. So, all right, we'll start a web company. And so that's what we did. We started a service called Zanga. Not Zynga, Zanga. with an X, xanga.com, and it was an early. We started working in 1999. We launched in 2000. It was an early web blogging community. The idea was you would write your blog and read your friends' blogs all in the same place, and we had these great social feedback loops and all this other stuff. And I guess our competitor was Blogger at the time, and I was following closely what Blogger was doing, and I was really admiring the work that Blogger's co-founder Evan Williams was doing, and later on I would find out that he too was admiring the work we were doing, because we were doing something a little different from him. He was catering to geeks, and we were catering to more mainstream users, because you didn't have to know how to set up your own domain and FTP. With Xanga, you just did it all in one place. And so I'm working along at Xanga, and one of the things that happened at Xanga was, as the company grew, the company culture started changing in a way that I didn't like. And I was young and dumb enough not to realize that I could have worked to steer the company culture in a direction that I was happy with. So instead what I did was I decided to leave. And I was still obsessed with this idea that this concept of blogging was going to change everything. The idea that the democratization of information was going to be available to everyone. All you had to do was have a web connection and a keyboard. You just typed in this form and you had a voice on the web. It just seemed totally amazing to me. So I was obsessed with it, so I was constantly blogging. I was also writing essays for web magazines, and I ended up writing a couple of books. And then I ended up for a brief period of time in academia, and I was at Wellesley College, and that was 2002. So I had left Xanga, I was at Wellesley College, and I was helping some of the professors use using blogging in their classrooms. And at the time I had this idea that I later thought was just stupid, so I canceled it. I worked on it, I built a prototype, but I thought it was dumb. It was build a social network just for colleges. So I threw that idea away, because that was dumb. And then I had this other idea, like, a lot of my blog posts are really short. I should just do like this really short, crappy blogging service just for people who want to write really short blog posts. So I created this project called sideblogger.com, and the tagline was like, for the posts that aren't good enough for your main blog. And then like 100 people used it, and I was like, this is a dumb idea. Who wants to do small blogging? That's dumb. So I canceled that idea. And then what happened was the company Blogger got acquired by Google in 2003. And I got a note from Evan Williams, the co-founder of Blogger, and because we had always sort of admired each other's work and linked to each other's blogs and stuff like that, he said, how'd you like to come out to California and work at Google and work on the Blogger team? And I said, that's cool, that sounds great. Meanwhile, I hadn't even graduated college, and I was an artist. I didn't study computer science. And at the time, Google was only hiring like PhDs in computer science. I didn't realize this, but Evan had gone behind the scenes to do so much work to get me to be considered for a role there. And he had like gone up to Larry and Sergey and said, he's written these books, he's the guy, come on, you gotta. And so I thought it was just a job offer, and I was just gonna drive out there and get the job. And so I talked to a few people on the phone, it all went well. And then the last talk was, okay, you're gonna need to fly out here and just meet a few people before we finalize things. And I said, wait a minute, I'm gonna have to fly? Because at the time I had developed this like high anxiety and this fear of flying. And they're like, yeah, you have to fly out and meet people. And I was like, okay, forget it, I don't want the job. And they're like, what? And I emailed Evan, I was like, thanks for everything, but I got a good thing going here at Wellesley College. It's good, we quit work at 4. I like it. And little did I know he had done all this work to get me the job. So Google got back in contact with me, and they're like, all right, Stone, you want to play hardball? We'll double the salary, we'll double the stock options. And I don't do that. I don't play hardball at all. And I was like, oh my God, they think I'm playing hardball? Like, this is crazy. So at that point, I decided I would find a way to get over my fear of flying and get out there. And I did. And the first time I ever met Evan was when he picked me up at the airport in his Subaru. And so I worked at Google, and it was awesome. It was Google pre-IPO, and all kinds of crazy stuff was going on. I would go into a room. One time I walked into a room, and there was a guy with like all these DVRs all taken apart and all hooked up and all these TVs playing. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "I'm recording everything that's on TV." And I was like, "All right. Sorry." Because I was always getting lost. I was always like, "Where's my desk?" And there was another time I walked into a room and there was all these people like just at these weird units scanning books. And I was like, "What are you guys doing in here?" And they're like, "We're scanning every book in the world." And I was like, "All right. What the hell's going on here?" And Sergey was going around in like these bouncy shoes. He's like, "This is the future." It was weird, but it was awesome. And so I managed to carve out like this perfect job for myself because I really pissed off some of the first managers they tried to pair me with, because they're like, "What do you do here?" And I was like, "I pretty much do whatever I want." And they were like, "No, you can't do that. You have to do these things." And I was like, "All right, I'll do those things." And then like a quarter later, he's like, "Did you do these things?" And I was like, "No, I just said I would do them because you seemed like you really wanted me to say yes." And I just remember him getting really red in the face. And then the next person that went into his office came back and told me, like, "What did you say to that guy? Because your name was like all crossed out really angrily on his whiteboard." And I was like, I don't know. And so finally Google just said, "Look, do whatever you want. You don't report to anybody, and you'll get all the bonuses and stuff." And I was like, "Sounds good." And then Evan left and decided to take a break and maybe do something else. And that really bummed me out because I realized when he left that I didn't move to California to work at Google. I moved to California to work with Evan. So at that point, I had to make a really difficult decision, kind of like when I had to decide to go work with Steve. I said, "Well, what do I do? Do I stay?" And this was, by the way, so I joined pre-IPO, and then Google IPO'd. And a quick side story, there was this favorite bathroom of mine that nobody knew about. It was kind of behind the cafeteria. And they had called this like emergency meeting in 2004, and it was like, "Everyone come into the cafeteria, we have a big thing to tell you." And I was like, "I'm gonna go pee in my favorite bathroom first." And the only other person there was Larry, and he was like going over his notes. And as soon as I came in, he was like, "Oh, God." And I was like, "Oh shit, I just ruined his like IPO speech. Because that must be what this is." And it was. And anyways, so Evan left, and then I was like, "Okay, I gotta go join Evan." And I remember my manager at the time was like, "So you don't care about money?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do care about money. I have all this debt from my first startup still." And he was like, "No, you don't care about money." I was like, "Yes, I do. Why are we having this weird conversation?" He was like, "Don't you understand?" And I was like, "No." And then I understood later how much money I left behind, and I was like, "Oh shit." Now I know what he was talking about. So what happened was, Evan and I had this idea on a car ride home from Google one night where I asked him, I said, "Look, these iPod things seem cool, and people, we know we can record our voice in Flash through a browser. We can convert that to MP3, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course." And I was like, and then can't we, through RSS, can't we transmit the MP3 to like a client and just have people download whatever somebody else recorded onto their iPods? Couldn't we do couldn't we sort of democratize the idea of radio? And Evan did his holy shit face where he was like, "Oh my God, that could be a whole thing." It turns out other people had been thinking of it. It was called podcasting, but we thought we were total geniuses at the time. And we decided to make a whole company based on this concept. It was called Odeo. And so I left Google, joined Odeo. Apple added podcasting into iTunes, and we thought, good place for it. Now what do we do? But more importantly than that, while we were working on Odeo, we we realized that good audio is professionally produced, and you cut out all the bad stuff. And listening to an hour and a half of somebody go on and on about like the future of RSS was not good. And also every time we tried to make a podcast, we would get all giggly and shy in front of the microphone, and it just didn't work. And I realized at that point that it just wasn't going to work for us because we weren't emotionally invested in the project. We didn't really like. It was a thing that we thought other people would like, not for us. And at the time, Evan actually came up with this genius sort of pivot for the company where we would totally win at podcasting. And we went to dinner that next night, and I said, "Your document is amazing. There's one problem." And he said, "What?" I said, "Do you want to be the best in the podcasting business?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Neither do I." And then we were like, "What are we going to do now? We don't even care." So Evan, to his credit, had this great idea. And we were a small company, and he said, "Look, we raised money to do podcasting, but I want a skeleton crew to keep audio going, and then I want the rest of you guys to pair up and just do something you think is cool." And I had become really good friends with this guy, Jack Dorsey, and we had been sort of doing side projects and dreaming up little things because we also weren't that interested in audio. And this was a great chance for us to work on something together. So we collaborated on this early prototype. It was kind of faked and kludged together. The idea that you could use SMS and the web to just kind of say what you're doing. And we put together a workflow, and we showed it to the team after our initial 2 weeks when we built the prototype, and the team thought it was really stupid. They were like, "Couldn't you do something like put video in there or something?" We're like, "No, the whole point is that it's super simple, and it works on all mobile phones because all mobile phones have SMS." And they were like, "Eh." But Evan said, like, "Okay, people didn't like it, but keep working on it. I think it's a cool idea." So we kept working on it, and a few things happened. Like, one really early thing that happened was when we were just still prototyping, like, is this a thing? Does it work? My wife and I had bought this little house in Berkeley, and I had watched enough This Old House and Bob Vila when I was a kid to think that I could do a little home maintenance. And I decided I would rip up all the carpeting and the floor of our Berkeley house to expose the beautiful hardwood underneath. And there was nothing underneath. And I basically ruined the house, and I was like, and it was a heat wave, so I was like dripping sweat, and I had all this undone carpet, like, great. And my phone buzzed in my pocket, and it was a tweet, and it was Evan, and he said, "Sipping a glass of Pinot Noir after a massage in Napa Valley." And I just laughed out loud at the incongruence of the two things, and when I realized that I was laughing, I realized that I was having joy, and I was emotionally invested in the product, and I realized, like, I'm doing the right thing this time. We're doing the right thing, even though people don't think it's that great idea. So we were working on it in that spirit for quite some time. In fact, the biggest critique of Twitter was, Twitter is not useful. And Evan at the time said, "Well, neither is ice cream. Should we ban ice cream and all joy?" And I thought he had a good point. In fact, one comment also was, Twitter is the Seinfeld of the internet. It's a website about nothing. And I put that on the front page as a testimonial because I love Seinfeld. I was like, that's great. It's a great testimonial. So we worked on it like in that joyful capacity for some time. And then in the big thing that happened, the time when we realized that we were onto something was March 2007 at this conference called South by Southwest, which is a film festival, a music festival, and before that, like, all the dorks get together, and it's the interactive part. It since has become really, really big, but at the time it was pretty nerdy. But the point is, we had a good amount of early adopters in the Bay Area that all went to this place at the same time. So we had a nice saturation of Twitter users at this one concentrated place. And one thing that happened that just blew my mind was, when I heard the story, was that there was this guy at a pub at night. You know, the partying and the networking is as much part of it as the panels during the day. And he was at this pub, and it was too crowded and loud for talking. So he sent out a tweet that said, "This place is too loud, let's go to this other place," and he named the place, sent out the tweet. In the 8 minutes it took him to walk to the other place, it had filled to capacity, there was a line around the block, so his plan totally backfired. What had happened was he had tweeted, that tweet got retweeted, etc., and all these people went there. And the metaphor or the image of a flock of birds moving together around an object in flight came to mind, because this is something that looks incredibly choreographed and incredibly practiced, but in fact it's not. It's rudimentary communication among individuals in real time that allows the many to suddenly become one, behave as one, and then go back to being many again. And the thing that was so amazing was that I realized there was no such thing for humans. There was no, even though this exists in some ways in nature, like with schools of fish and with birds and with slime mold and ants and other things, there was nothing like this that people could use. And yes, it was a party, but what if it had been an emergency or some other important thing? And so that really, really got to me. And we went back and we formed Twitter Incorporated, I think like a week later. And from that point on, Twitter just started to somehow find its way into almost every situation that we heard about around the world. And you know, Twitter was actually very small, and there wasn't even that many users, but we were being heralded as this like amazing service that was working its way into things. And whether or not that's true is up for debate, but the point is we were getting a lot of exposure. And actually, one funny story that comes to mind is that there was this one morning that I came to work, and my phone voicemail was totally full, my email inbox was totally full, and it was all these major publications, and they all had essentially the same question for me: "Mr. Stone, what was your role in the Moldovan revolt yesterday?" And I was like, okay, Wikipedia, Moldova, what the hell? And I was so tempted to write them back and be like, well, I wasn't happy with that regime, so, you know, I used the button over here that I have. And, you know, in truth, it just highlighted the fact that there were so many things going on, there's so many things people were doing, that we weren't going to be able to, you know, control them or anything. And the lesson, and then it just grew and grew and grew from there, and so many things happened. And the big lesson that I learned at the time, and I learned this because a friend of mine asked me, what do you want people to think about Twitter in 5 years? And this was a while ago. And you know, given the fact that it was having this impact, or seemingly having this impact in all of these events around the world, these major important events, the thing that came to mind to me was that no matter how sophisticated our algorithms might eventually get, or how many data centers we would build, if Twitter was to be a triumph, and if the change that people were going to bring about using either Twitter or any tool, really, that if this change was to be a triumph, then it was not necessarily to be a triumph of technology, it was to be a triumph of humanity. In other words, it didn't matter. The technology didn't matter. And it wasn't us. And it really was the people. And it was people doing brave things. It was people doing mundane things. It was people self-organizing for charity. All of these things, and that idea that you know, social media, whatever you want to call it, was to be a triumph of humanity. That ended up being something that really struck me, and that drove me to go to work every day, and that drove me to work really hard when everything was breaking, when everyone was telling us we were doing the wrong thing. That really resonated with me and pulled me through. And I still think that's very true. No matter how cool new things come out, and no matter how sophisticated technology gets, I think we have to remember that it's about the people who are using the tool. And it really is just a tool. It's about what they're able to do with it, because people are basically good, and if you give them the right tools, they will prove that to you every single day. And that was a big lesson learned for me, working at Twitter, and also just watching, YouTube and Facebook and all of the other big players here, and I think it's true for all of them. So now I want to just talk a little bit about my childhood again. This is me as a professional child, Bizstone professional kid. That's the last time I had a suit. I just bought a suit. It actually looks a lot like this for a wedding coming up. So there's me as a kid. And I want to switch gears a little bit here. When I was a kid, I thought that doing good things was something that you were just supposed to do because that's what people did. Like, persons were supposed to do good things. So if somebody was raising money, like, please give me a quarter, we're fighting hunger, you just did it. But you never expected to have anybody ever, like, call you later or send you a piece of mail that says, thank you for the quarter, we fixed world hunger. Like, I just thought it was a never-ending problem, and you just were, that was just part of being a person, was doing good things. But as I got older and smarter and realized things, I started to work, I started to get into volunteering and philanthropy early, and one of the organizations that I started working with is an organization called Product Red, which battles HIV/AIDS in Africa. And they have this program where they give these retroviral pills to people who are essentially at death's door. Like, they look like they're going to die. This is a little girl at 11 months old. And she's about the same age as my boy now, who's like a huge bruiser, hence the pulling of the muscle, changing a diaper. And so they give these retroviral pills, which are about 40 cents a day, to their patients for, about 90 days. And a complete transformation happens. They call this the Lazarus effect, because they go from death's door in 3 months to plump and healthy again, and very unlikely to transmit the disease. The important lesson here is that in doing so, and you think about it in a grander scale than just one person, you're treating moms that can go back to being moms or teachers, and you get and dads that can go back to work, and people can go back to just living their normal lives. And what happens over a period of time is an entire geoeconomic area becomes stabilized, and they can move on to the next one. So you really can measure this impact, this good that you're doing. And by the way, this is a picture of the same girl now. She's totally healthy and totally awesome. And what this work made me realize is that just like if you were to put like $40 in a bank account with compound interest every month for 40 years, you'd have several $1 million to have a great midlife crisis. What it made me realize was that along the same lines, altruism can have compound impact. So the earlier you get started, whether it's volunteering or donating a little money, the earlier you get started doing that, the more impact you're going to have over time and over your life. And that was a huge lesson learned for me, because I think so many people think about philanthropy and altruism the wrong way. They think they have to wait until they're really comfortable and financially well off before they start throwing money at a problem, when in fact you can just you could give $25 to Donors Choose, or you could volunteer for half a day on a weekend, and you can start early. And by the way, volunteering is like such an incredible networking thing. So, you know, altruism and giving and doing good for others really pays back. You know, you can volunteer, and you're volunteering next to a CEO. Maybe you're looking for a job. You go volunteer, you feel good about yourself, your confidence goes up, and you're networking. It's an incredible thing to realize. So I always encourage not only individuals to get involved in altruism early, but I really think that when you start a company as an entrepreneur, you have such a wonderful opportunity to weave doing good into the very core of your culture and of your business model. We hired a corporate social responsibility person at Twitter years before we hired our first salesperson to make sure that we had a culture of impact and of doing good. And to this day, it's really, really paying off in terms of attracting more talent, because people are attracted to meaning. People are attracted to doing good. And so it turns out to be a competitive edge. So there's many reasons why you would want to embrace altruism in everything that you do. So completely switching gears again, what's next? That's a good question, because I think that when these big search engines and big social media companies and Twitter are all telling us that we're going to connect all 7 billion people in the world to each other and to unlimited amounts of information, I say, I believe you. So now what do we do? And this guy, Albert Einstein, famously said, information is not knowledge. So infinite amounts of information coming at us isn't going to make us smarter. So I think the first phase of the internet was fantastic. It was all about getting us connected and getting us to this place, this amazing place where humanity feels like one global citizenry, and we get to hear in real time about events that are going on across the world, and yet what does that do for us, and how are we going to take that information and do something good with it? So to me it's kind of an alchemical type of situation. How can we take information and transmute it into understanding such that we can take some sort of action? And I think that's the key equation for the next phase of the internet. And that's one of the things that my new company, Obvious, and some of our projects are working on. We believe in building systems that help people work together to make the world a better place. And we believe that now that the media landscape is completely different in terms of, just 4 or 5 years ago, the world is networked now. So we can take advantage of the incredible networked world to sort of look at things fresh and say, okay, now what are we going to do with all this information such that people can spend their time looking at it, but really get something out of it. You have to turn it into understanding in order to take action. So, just looking towards tomorrow. This is a big sign we have up in our Obvious office that we started. We started Obvious again about a year ago. One of the biggest things that I'm passionate about is trying to answer the question, how can we redefine the success metric of capitalism itself such that it has 3 ingredients? 1, traditional financial success. Okay, fine. It should definitely have that. That's obvious. But 2, it should be impactful, and it should make some sort of positive impact on the world. 3, it should bring joy to the people who are working on it and to the people who are using your service or your product. So it should make money, it should be impactful, and it should be joyful. And I know that is somewhat aspirational, but I think that's the way we have to think now, because we have to be better going forward. And we have to set a higher bar for success. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm working on. We're working on a new project. Obvious is two things. One, it's a startup, and we're working on a project called Medium, which is really trying to answer the question: what does it look like to create a publishing platform in today's media landscape? So we're looking at it from first principles. What metrics should we measure? What should it look like? How do we leverage mobile, et cetera? And two, we are helping other companies, other startups that we feel are philosophically aligned with us. And we may give them money, we may give them, and we certainly give them our time. Our philosophy there is essentially, we'll do whatever it takes to help them succeed because we think that they're doing something meaningful in the world. We think they embody that idea of the redefinition of success. So that's what we're working on at Obvious, and I would love to get, of course, as much as we can, question answered about Obvious and about any of these things that I just talked about. So thank you so much for listening to me, and let's do the Q&A.
Thank you, that's terrific.
Are we going to the Tonga room now?
Yeah, no, we'll do the Tonga room.
Q&A first.
So what struck me as obvious was how you've taken a career of the non-obvious and done amazing things with it. So it was obvious that a kid would learn basketball or football or baseball, but you did non-obvious and you made lacrosse. It was obvious that someone who was bright and had a full ride scholarship would get a college degree, but you did the non-obvious. Same again with your job in the book company and with Google. And so I think in your new endeavor that we are going to see some amazing things because you're the master of making something not obvious obvious.
Don't overhype it. Come on, it's probably going to be nothing. It'll probably,
it
probably won't work.
Yeah, Twitter, no one will ever use it. So anyway, so I'd like to open up the floor. And we'll do this two different ways. So if you're tweeting, you could feel free to tweet. And then I'm getting some feeds of some questions that will come through your Twitters.
He's not going to actually open the floor because if he does, you'd all fall.
That's right. That's right.
He means he's going to open up the conversation, right?
That was kind of obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to have to buy this man a drink. Anyway, so
Tonga room.
Tonga room, yes. Anyone have a question?
Comment,
I
concern?
see a few hands. So there are mics placed strategically through the floor. So if you would, step up to the mic.
There are also a few Michaels in the crowd.
That's right, yes, yes. Yes, please.
So I'll just ask this question. You referenced earlier your inspiration from your artistic background. And if you look at what's going on in our educational systems today, how would you recommend that the world think about art and creativity in regards to education?
Well, my wife and I have something called the Biz and Livia Stone Foundation, which is very creatively named. And one of the things we support is bringing art back into the classroom. And we do it in a way that is what's so funny? Oh. I don't see it. Can I pitch you an idea? Is that the funny one?
That's the problem with the damn Twitter.
Freedom of speech. So I think art is, you know, you can look at it in several ways, but art is in some ways storytelling, and in some ways play. And both of those things are, since the inception of mankind, not even mankind, other animals, they learn through play. They learn through storytelling. It's how we best learn. So art is incredibly important. It gives us new perspective, and it teaches us to explore. And so I'm very passionate about bringing art back in the classroom, especially in a way that is standards compliant with curricula. So one of the things my wife and I do is we actually install art programs that have been cut from some of the schools in the Bay Area. We bring them back in because we really think it's an important thing. So I would stress it. I think it's incredibly important.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Great question. Others? Yes, please step up to a microphone, if you will. That's good. It's a good mic.
So, hello.
Hello.
What do you choose? What do you choose a bird for Twitter as the logo?
Okay, so the reason we chose a bird, which by the way is legally named Larry Bird because we had to do that for copyright purposes, and I'm from Boston.
I thought it was because of me.
And but the reason I drew a bird early on and decided to use it as the main metaphor for Twitter is because what other company can use the image of a bird in flight to represent its service? Any company can use the first letter of its name. That's easy. But I wanted to use a bird because I wanted to show freedom. I wanted to show expression. I also wanted to reference nature, and the word Twitter is in the dictionary, and it actually means the short bursts of information that birds make, and so it just all seemed to come together perfectly.
Thank you. Hang on for a second. I forgot to ask you to say your name and what country you're from. That'd be great.
Okay. Hi all, I'm David Altuve from Venezuela. Nice to meet you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to intersperse one of the questions that came through a tweet here. Is can there be too much connectivity?
Sure, there can be too much of anything, right? I think the bigger answer, I mean, sort of the other question there is, what are we going to do about all of this hyperconnectivity? And I think the real answer is we're still figuring it out, because even though it seems like we've had Google forever and we've had social networks forever, it's been a decade. It's been hardly any time. And I think we'll probably go too far before we begin to realize as a society what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I think I see people currently testing those limits. You know, you see people posting stupid stuff on Facebook that gets them fired, and then you see people writing essays on Blogger or whatever that gets them hired. So, and then there's the other idea of the word engagement, and this is a word that a lot of Silicon Valley companies use, or you know, large-scale communication platforms use to define. It's a metric they use to define how well they're doing. But I think you need to delve a little bit deeper into what does engagement mean. So for one company, engagement means this is great. We have 12-year-olds looking at our site 12 hours a day, nonstop, clicking on things. For other companies, they say we have people coming to our site 30 times a day for 12 seconds to look something up and get the right answer so they can make a good decision. So I think there's healthy engagement and there's unhealthy engagement, just as there's healthy connectivity and unhealthy connectivity. And I think we're still figuring out what's the appropriate level. And with the mobile boom, we're seeing that at a very fast pace. Like, one example of bad connectivity is texting while driving. Obviously, that's horrible, right? But texting when you're broken down on the side of the road is great. So yes, there can be too much, but I think we're going to figure out what just the right amount is, because I have generally faith in humanity.
Good, thank you. So another question in the back there. I see a hand up. So if you would, please step up to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Javier Sierra. I'm from Venezuela as well.
Go Venezuela!
Yeah. Anyway, my main question was, I know that Obvious is going to engage in a lot of social activities and social programs. I was wondering if, are you planning on using the Twitter user base or your access to millions of people to enhance these social activities? Is there any kind of connection between the two companies and platforms?
Well, from early on Twitter, we made it a point to highlight pro-social initiatives. I remember early on contacting Scott Harrison from Charity Water and saying, get a Twitter handle so I can email everyone on Twitter that you're on here and point them all to your website. So he scrambled to do that, and we also launched a program early on. We actually launched a wine label called Fledgling, and we made a wine together with a winery, and we didn't actually do it ourselves, but we partnered with a winery, and all of the sales from the wine go to Room to Read, which is an organization that helps fight illiteracy all around the world. And what I like to say about that was that if we do our jobs right and we reach almost everyone in the world, then our scaling issue is going to be illiteracy, because if people can't read, they can't tweet. So this is actually for the bottom line, not just for social good. So I'm always trying to think, how can we leverage the power of the company, and how can we weave into the culture the idea of doing good? Because it's not just about doing good, it's also about, I think I mentioned before, you attract a higher level of talent to your company if you are attached to meaningful things, because there's a lot of really talented engineers in Silicon Valley, and they can work anywhere they want. And a lot of them will make their choice based on what's a more meaningful choice for me. And so yes, we do attempt to leverage the power of the companies for good. But again, we try to spread it around, because we don't want to have a particular, we don't want to sort of choose something and force all of the employees to be for it. You know, we'd rather highlight these great use cases across the entire platform as a way of showing people, whatever your thing is, here's how you can do it. And there are actually published best practices for nonprofits and NGOs on the Twitter website that we have collected over the years to help people. So that's kind of the way we approach it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I forgot to mention that Krishna Hanks was the person that asked the first question. But following on another question that Charlie Isaacs raised, which is in line with the recent question, how do you keep designers interested after the first couple years of a project? I think you answered it partially with kind of connectedness, but this is more general questions about retention of talent and motivation of talent.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of different things. I mean, one of the things we're doing now at Obvious is, and Medium, is really giving a lot of responsibility and leadership, distributed leadership across the company. So we don't function on a typical hierarchical business setup. We form groups around the work, and no one group is more important than another group. So there might be a group whose work is doing board of directors type stuff. Then there's another group that works on mobile design, and then there's another group that works on infrastructure. And they all have links between them so that they can keep abreast of what they're working. I think, so to answer your question more concretely, the way you keep designers interested in their work is to continually challenge them to iterate and to come up with new, bold ideas. I think so I did all of the original UI design for Twitter, and I drew the bird, and I did all that stuff. And for me, a lot of the features were just designed because I was like, well, what could go here? You know, like how about how about snooze button, don't bother me during these hours or something. So I think designers are also inherently product managers, and they're great at coming up with new ideas. So I always encourage folks to do crazy, wacky stuff, and that can be a really fun way to keep people interested, because maybe you don't ship it, but there might be some aspect of it that does get shipped, and I think that's rewarding in and of itself. So experimentation is the short answer.
Great, thanks. Let's go way in the back.
The double hand raise?
Yeah.
No.
Let's go single hand, then
Single
double hand.
hand,
The
okay.
double hand's quite enthusiastic.
Yeah, that was
we'll
a
have
good-
to get to him. But we'll go single hand first, yes. No, we'll get to you.
No, then
we
we'll
see,
do
we
double
see.
hand.
Okay.
And then if anyone
We'll
raises
go back to back.
if you
single
raise a
hand, double
foot,
hand.
we'll hook you up.
Oh, look, he deferred to the double hand.
Oh.
Nice guy.
Awesome. I was just wondering,
Do you have a
How do
name,
you-
double hand?
I'm Kyle Burns. I'm a
AKA
Hult
double hand.
alumni. Yeah, double hand.
Go Hult, 2011.
Rock
I got you, Kyle.
I really wonder, how do you start a company without a real revenue model, or maybe you had a revenue model in mind, and then currently, what is the revenue model you use now that really says Twitter is going to make money this way?
Well, in both cases, well, first of all, Twitter was born out of sort of a company that already existed, so that was an unusual way of doing a startup. For obvious, we were in sort of a different position. We said, we want to do something important. If you want to do that, join us. And we were fortunate enough to get some incredibly talented people, and talented people attract other talented people. To start a company, you just start a company. You just say, hey, we're Evident Biz, and we're called Obvious, and we're a company. It's just like when I first decided I was going to be an artist, it was sort of an epiphany. Someone asked me, what do you do? And I said, I'm an artist. And then I was like, I guess I'm an artist now. So you just start a company. And then when it comes to business models, it depends entirely on what the company is. I mean, if you're starting an information network on the web, the way to make money is when you have millions of users. And so you can't really worry about that until you do. You have to create some sort of value before you can create profit. We knew that essentially if you look at any internet company that has in excess of tens of millions of companies, they have so many different ways that they can make money. That's not a problem. The problem is getting to that critical mass. And so in an internet company or in a large-scale communications platform, the goal at first isn't like, what's our business model going to be, and let's take 5 of our 12 guys to put them on that. That would be a huge mistake, because you need to cross that chasm and get to that point where you have a huge amount of people using your network. And for us at Twitter, I like to use that phrase, value before profit, because once we started to see that companies, NGOs, et cetera, were getting value from Twitter, we said, how can we help them get more value by giving us some money? So that's working now. You can just go on Twitter and see that we have promoted tweets and promoted trends and all these things. There's a lot of ways of getting your message in front of a lot of people by spending a little bit of money, and it's working very, very well. Same thing if you look at Google. AdWords wouldn't have worked unless there was a lot of people looking at search results. So the internet companies are different, because you really just have to get the audience first, and then you worry about how are you going to go about making money, because it's really not a problem when you have millions and millions of people using your service. It's different if you're starting a coffee shop in a small town. You have to come up with a business model first and go from there. But yeah, you just get started. You probably screw up at first too. You probably get started with something that's not really going to be your main thing, but you have to start somewhere.
So I didn't forget about single hand. Single hand. Wait. This is
no, the other guy.
The other single hand.
Yeah, other hand.
Yes.
And
he has a name and a country.
This would be awkward if you actually only had one hand.
That's right. We wouldn't do that. Yeah. That would not
Hi, I'm Rocco from Italy. My question is about the future of social media. An Italian philosopher of the 17th century, Gian Battista Vico, said that history tends to repeat itself, but not like a circle, more like a spiral, because every time it repeats itself, there's a development. Social media started for like something for few. You made an example, also Facebook. Can I say Facebook? Yeah. Okay. Facebook just kidding.
Say whatever you want.
Wasn't that crazy college idea you were talking about?
No, it was a bad idea.
Bad idea.
And now everybody uses social media, of course. Do you think that in the future, they will become again, so we will come back, they will become again for few people, but with a development so that they will be more specific, so we will have maybe hundreds of social media, but that they talk about something specific that I'm interested in, instead of social media that talk about everything and nothing at the same time? Thanks.
So, first of all, the term social media is starting to sound a little bit weird to me because everything's social and everything's media. Media is social. It's people writing stories about other people who are doing things, and then people read those stories and discuss them. That's all very social. We're all social. So I feel like that term is a temporary term. It's being used a lot right now, but it's all social. It's all media. It's all media. Where it's headed, I think, is what I spoke to earlier about. Okay, so first phase of the internet, we build this connected world. Where it's headed, I think, is we need to be able to, like I said, transmute information into knowledge, which then can be more likely made into action. And that's the important thing. So how do we get, in a world of infinite information, how do we get the right information to the right people so they can make the right decisions and they can do good things? And that's a big problem. And I think that's what we're asking ourselves now at Obvious. What can we measure and what can we put in place to hopefully create information that is relevant to you, that you can make good decisions based on? And we're testing out different things. If you check out Medium right now, you'll see one experiment is at the bottom of an article. It says, "This is good." And that's a signal for us that somebody liked it, and other people might like it too. So there's just a ton of stuff. We're just at the very beginning of sort of divining relevance from this infinite information. Something funny must have come up. I can't see it from here. What is it?
Oh, come on up.
Oh, they're asking if a specific person has a question. Wow. Fantastic.
Okay, good. Go for it.
So my name is Anahit, and I'm from Iran originally. And I was wondering, since I'm an artist and doing MBA, I was wondering, should we expecting some creative idea comes, innovative new idea comes from Twitter? Like you said, you're gonna do with your wife, bringing this art studio back.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, so are we going to be doing something related
new?
to the arts?
Yeah, related to the art, innovative, or is it?
Or am I going to be doing something creative with my wife?
I want to know are you going to do something new in the art world, related to the art world?
No, I wasn't sort of hinting at any new artistic feature of Twitter.
Nothing to the new, like
not that I know of.
world.
I actually haven't worked there in a year, so maybe.
Thank you.
So there was a question a few minutes ago, a follow-up actually from Lindsay Riddle. What criteria do you use at working at Obvious and/or Medium, and how many are working there now? I think there's a request for an internship or job somewhere in there.
We are hiring, and
that's good.
There's about 15 people or so who are working at Obvious, and we hire for funny. We like funny. We like people with a good sense of humor. We obviously we hire, really talented, skilled folks in their area. We hire nice people. If someone's a really, really, like, just the best person in their field, but they're a jerk, then we don't hire them. And we don't put a lot of emphasis on traditional credentials. We like to look at what do people do in their spare time, what do they like to read, what are their hobbies, are we going to enjoy working together? That's a really big thing for us, because this is how we spend our life, and we want to spend the hours, the long hours that we spend at work with people that we want to wake up and go in and work next to. And we also like to hire people that are smarter than us, so we can continually feel like we're reaching up and learning new things. These are some of the things we look for. Of course, it depends on the job.
Yes, of course. Good. So how about this gentleman right here? Come on up. Yes, come either way, but get to a mic so everyone can hear you.
No, go to that one.
Okay, so my name is Mohammed, and I'm from Saudi Arabia. I just asked my question through the hashtag, but actually Larry didn't like the question or something. So
no, I get a subset of all the really good questions.
I'm just kidding. Okay, so before my question, I just want to deliver a word of appreciation to Twitter. In Saudi Arabia, many lost people were found through Twitter. Many, like hundreds of people, survived from death through Twitter. And most importantly, I'm grateful for Twitter for playing a major role in the Arab Spring. So thank you guys. You really played a major job there. Okay, so my question is, I know you came from Google, and I understand that Google has a way different philosophy than Twitter. But to see Google, how they expand horizontally. They don't have just one function. They actually provide several functions and providing different features for people. While Twitter, we feel it's the same. Aren't there any future plans to provide more features and expand horizontally? I'll give you an example. Back in my grad school in Saudi Arabia, the international marketing instructor, he was encouraging us to create a hashtag after each class and tweeting an example of that case we read before the class, for example. And it was like a huge hashtag that taking 100 charts, and we only have 40 charts to type whatever we can type. We found it inconvenient. So maybe one example Twitter can do is Twitter education, like another function of Twitter. Aren't you guys planning to do such functions and grow horizontally?
Well, obviously, first of all, I have to repeat again that I don't have an operational role at Twitter, so I'm not working on any new features. I visit Twitter 2 or 3 times a month and find out what's going on. But I will say, yes, they work on new features. And one of the things that's interesting to me, Adam Bain, who heads up sales at Twitter. And actually, sales has a large engineering team that works on like sales engineering. He was referring recently to tweets as sort of envelopes that you can open up, and all of these wonderful things can happen inside. And you can expand a tweet, and you can play a video or do something else inside it, perform some verb inside of tweets. And I can imagine that that arsenal having more variety. But I can't speak to any new features because I don't really work there.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Over there, please.
So I want to start by saying I'm a very nice person and I'm funny as well.
You are nice and funny.
We know where this is going.
No, but I also want to apologize because I'm not a Twitter user, but I will be after tonight.
You are a Twitter user because you looked at some of these tweets.
Yeah, right now. Okay,
You're
so
reading
that's a
tweets.
user.
It's like saying a television, I'm not a television user because I don't make TV shows.
Okay, I'm a Twitter user officially now.
There we go.
So I have a short question for you. So based upon your answer, I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
So speaking about Facebook, I know you don't like that topic. It seems like that, but still.
Why is everyone like saying I don't like Facebook?
Do you consider Facebook as a competitor to Twitter or not?
I don't. I mean, from the very beginning, I didn't see Twitter as social. The idea was to follow people you didn't know. It was to get information that you would otherwise not be able to have access to, and then to be able to spread that information so that other people could have it. And I always thought of it as kind of an information network. I always thought of it as kind of almost like a news wire created by people around the world. And so I always thought of it as very different from a social network in that, the fundamental model was different. You didn't follow, you didn't get in touch with people you used to know or you know. You followed individuals, organizations, companies, nonprofits that you wanted information from. So to me, it was always very different. That being said, I think there's probably overlaps between the two, and that can be good because competition is very motivating for people to keep on pushing. So yes and no. I mean, I don't think of it per se as direct competition, but there's probably overlaps.
Yeah, because Facebook statuses are kind of close to
Yeah.
tweeting.
Yeah,
that's how
and that's
I
just
think of it.
and that's one aspect of their service. I mean, they have so many other things.
Okay, so I'm glad that you say maybe yes, because otherwise you shoot down my second part. So I'm going to ask you the other question. So Facebook you spoke about how it is not about technology and it is about people, and you like to keep it simple, and Twitter is kind of simple to use and all that. But Facebook is technologically advancing, like with the timeline and other things. Many people did not like timeline, but I think it's catching on, whatever. So my question is, would Twitter innovate in order to compete? Or, as you say, you don't view Facebook as a competition, so would you just not worry about that so much?
A lot of questions about Twitter instead of my actual job at Obvious, but I really haven't worked there in a long time. What is the question? Would Twitter compete with Facebook? Will Twitter introduce new features, essentially?
Exactly. Like Facebook is doing that constantly.
Yes. I mean, I think all internet companies have to continue to evolve. And one of the things in the early days of Twitter that we did was we looked for patterns of usage, and we looked, what are people trying to do? What are they actually trying to do on this very rudimentary system? And how can we help them do that? So hashtags, for example, were something that emerged, and we said, oh, they're trying to, create sort of a taxonomy or a way of tagging these tweets. So we linked the hashtags to search results. We saw what people were doing with retweets, and we created a one-button way of retweeting that message so it went out to more people more efficiently. So there's always iteration and improvement across the system, and I think every company has to do that. But also in the early days of Twitter, we always said the whole service has to degrade gracefully, such that it still is a very useful service on the most rudimentary feature phone in a faraway country where people maybe only have access to a phone that's, best feature is SMS. So we always wanted to keep in mind that idea that constraint inspires creativity. And then going from there, of course, new features all the time, always being proposed. Best ones get implemented, best ones get added. It's something that all companies have to do.
Okay, thank you. I'm Aarti, just in case you're wondering.
So we're running out of time quickly. Time does fly. So one last question on obvious. Someone? Yes. Someone with a hat. Yes.
Hi. Thanks for the talk. It was really inspiring. I'm not really sure I can articulate this, but I'll try. So the way I understand it and the way I see this country working right now is sort of in a values crisis. And the way you speak about your business and obvious, and your values are clearly aligned, and I think that your values have been aligned for a while in the founding of the different organizations you've worked for. However, America gets a hold of it, it becomes mainstream, and it becomes this sort of mundane, slightly superficial rendition of a really well-intentioned concept. And I'm wondering, honestly, does it sting at all that that's what happens? Or does the fact that it's still being used in a really integral way continue to inspire? That's the vague question. The more specific one is with Obvious, when building it, are you thinking about it in terms of how do I build something that can't be used just to like hashtag jokes or like talk about hot girls or whatever? Like, or do you build it knowing that it's always going to get used in a more mundane capacity, and also as long as the integrity is sufficient, that's good enough for you?
Well, with the startup that we're working on at Obvious called Medium, which is a reimagining from first principles of publishing, what we're doing is we're saying, if you were to start a publishing platform, given today's media landscape, what would it look like? And we're also trying to address that issue of, in a world of infinite information, where more information doesn't necessarily make us smarter, how do we create a publishing platform where good information rises to the top, and if you have 10 minutes to spend on the internet, it's 10 minutes very well spent on Medium. And so we are, I would say, directly trying to address the issue of quality as much as we can, because quality means different things to different people. And some of the things that one person might think mundane, another person might think is incredibly important. So it's a difficult thing to measure and to work on, but we are dedicated to taking on that challenge. And then with regard to Twitter, there are so many signals that we can look at in terms of things that people can do with tweets, the ways that they can interact with tweets, such that we can, or they, I should say, can work hard to raise the visibility of those tweets that are deemed important by a large amount of people. So I think it again speaks to what's next, which is how do we get that important, relevant information out of this fast-growing, insane amount of information. That's a huge challenge, and I hope more companies will work on it.
So I'd like to just comment on that last piece, because we saw in your prepared remarks and also your question or your answers to questions that there's information that derives knowledge, that derives some action, and ultimately leads to impact. And so with your successive moves through your career, we see that going. And with Medium, it seeks to create knowledge out of this vastness of information that is just so diverse and so hard to understand.
Right.
So I look forward to seeing the progress and success of Medium and whatever else you take on in the future. So thank you very much. It was a great
Thank you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that concludes our event. So thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we'll see you on campus, or we'll see you next year at next year's executive speaker. Thank you. Bye-bye.